Hello YouTube, G-Clef here, and I'm starting a new series called Answering Anti-Islam. Over recent years, I've been doing a lot of studying and research to retort the anti-Islamic rhetoric we're seeing emerging from the far right since the 90s. I have not seen content like what I'm creating present that wasn't either too long-winded or too simply put, so I've decided to put together this series. Not to mention, most of the content I see is not in retort to anyone anti-Islam, rather it's supportive of anti-Islamic theories. As someone who labels himself a conservative, I feel a need to expose these people on the far right for what they are, a complete fraud. And you don't have to look into this stuff that hard to discover their arguments are just terrible. For example, an article shared by a friend of mine on Facebook titled Sharia in American Courts: The Expanding Incursion of Islamic Law in the U.S. Legal System basically claims that the effort to invoke Sharia in U.S. courts is expanding. However, once you do read the PDF document the article is using, you'll see that every case where a lower court exonerated the accused because of the defendant's views of Sharia law was overturned upon appeal. This is hardly an expansion of invoking Sharia law. Despite the tone, the article itself admits this. Arguments like this are akin to those of ancient aliens and the like. They depend on the ignorance of the audience. The audience's ignorance allows the writer, or theoretician, or whatever you want to call them, to put their own spin on things, even if the writer does use citations, because writers like these bank on a reader not doing the research. During this series, I'll point out many false dilemmas and misinformation perpetrated by these anti-Islamic sources. This particular article is mild and somewhat honest compared to other examples I've amassed in my interactions with those who subscribe to such theories. After a multitude of religions, from folk religions to Christianity, almost 10 years I converted to Islam. Because little is known about Islam by the average person in the West, read United States, I never thought its theological ideas would reverberate with my own, specifically the retorts against Jesus being a part of God, l'Islam. After studying Judaism, I also saw the Jewish influence in Islam, which also appealed to me. After my conversion, I began to study the Quran and now study the Hanafi school of fiqh law. Fiqh law is the practical application of Sharia concepts. However, Sharia and fiqh will appear in a different episode. Today, we'll be discussing the hot topic of Taqiyah. There's a popular argument in the so-called social justice warriors clan called microaggressions. In the world of victimhood in which they live, they will hunt for things like racism and sexism even when they aren't there. While I was speaking with a friend, I was once accused of a microaggression and I didn't even know what it was. Psychologist Daryl Wing Su describes microaggression as, quote, brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to certain individuals because of their group membership. But there's more to it than just that. It is left up to the accuser to determine the meaning of what the accused said. That is, it is the one who claims to be the victim that defines the intentions of the accused words. This, of course, is scandalous, since the idea doesn't take into account what those accused of microaggressions actually meant by their speech or actions. Obviously, about 95% of this idea is subjective. The theory depends only on the ideas of the accuser. Similarly, there is an argument those who are anti-Islam use involving Taqiyah. As I've found, many of their arguments lead me to the source called thereligionofpeace.com. I'm going to use their claims. You'll see, I'll put in the description a link to the claims that I'm talking about. I will only be touching on a few points as I'm trying to keep these presentations relatively short and simple. In this example, we're seeing, despite the website referencing the Quran, a play on the audience's ignorance. They're betting you won't read the Quran's context of what they are citing. Rather, the writers present the false dilemmas with false evidences. Take, for example, the document saying, Quran 16:106 establishes that there are circumstances that, quote, compel a Muslim to lie. Here is a little context surrounding Ayah 106. So here's the actual text. Verily those who believe not in the ayat of Allah, Allah will not guide them, and theirs will be a painful torment. 105. It is only those who believe not in the ayat of Allah who fabricate falsehood, and it is they who are liars. 106. Whoever disbelieved in Allah after his belief, except him who is forced thereto, and whose heart is at rest with faith, but such as open their breasts to disbelief, on them is wrath from Allah, and theirs will be a great torment. Here we see the true context when we read the Quran. 104 is talking about those who do not believe in Islam receiving a punishment from God. 105 is saying those who do not believe in the Quran and or God, quote, fabricate falsehood. 106 can be confusing, especially because of the translation reference. Quote, whoever disbelieved in Allah after his belief, unquote, is an apostate. You know, it means someone who was once Muslim but is now not Muslim. The following sentence notes the exception, quote, him who is forced thereto disbelieve. Later, those who, quote, open their breasts to disbelief, on them is wrath of Allah. So, it has nothing to do with lying. It's talking about apostasy, and it's talking about basically somebody having the ability that if they're forced to say that they're a non-believer, even if they are a believer. When looking at the context, this has nothing to do with compelling to lie. It does not say, quote, except him who is forced to disbelieve, and they must say they disbelieve. There is no compulsion in this context to lie. This context insinuates a Muslim can lie about their religion if they are forced to claim not to believe, but they are not compelled to lie about their religion. In my next example, the writers of this website practically debunk themselves. This is amazing. So, Quran 9:3. Allah and His Messenger are free from liability to the idolaters. Dissolution of oaths with the pagans who remained at Mecca following its capture. They did nothing wrong, but were evicted anyway. The next verse refers only to those who have a personal agreement with Muhammad ﷺ as individuals. So, aside from removing the concept of the first Muslims being ousted by the pagan Arabs living in Mecca, all you really need to read is the following line, chapter 9, verse 4. Quote, except those of the idolaters with whom you have a treaty, and have not subsequently failed you in aught, nor have supported anyone against you, so fulfill their treaty to them to the end of their term. So the website's invocation of Kafir as a reference to proof that it was only individuals' oaths to Muhammad is dependent on certain Islamic scholarly interpretation, frequently called schools of Islam. Here the writers will give you an example that they feel supports them without mentioning that not all Orthodox schools believe in this interpretation. This example also depends on the reader's ignorance of the fact that Muhammad, according to the same person mentioned by them, Kafir, reported that the Prophet didn't expel anyone. Obviously, a poor use of referencing. Believing a source on one end and not another makes little sense. As you continue down the web page and look up the citations they're using, you will see they are specific interpretations or historians' interpretations. One example is Ibn Ishaq, who, although considered a trustworthy source as an historian collecting oral traditions, is rarely used by mainstream historical Islamic scholars. In other theories, some believe that Taqiyah is not just the ability to lie in certain circumstances, but in all circumstances. Indeed, in my own discussions with those who hold this view, I am considered to either always be lying to them or to be gullible and believe in the explanations I've been given via studying Islam. This argument is just as good as the microaggression argument. Through this claim, one can simply deflect any and all arguments. By coining everything most Muslims say is a lie, there's no need for any other argument. Typically, those who believe in this theory subscribe to another, that Islam's ultimate goal is to rule the entire world. This, of course, is a topic for another day. I hope that at least I've shown that these particular theories of thereligionofpeace.com are akin to the falsehoods perpetrated by pseudoscientific claims like ancient aliens. At best, the authors and supporters of such theories are merely stuck in their own ideas and only do biased research, and at worst, they are fabricating these false claims out of hatred for Muslims or Islam. Always, I repeat always, read references to claims. Research the authors cited and do more digging before completely subscribing to any idea about any topic. Thank you so much for your time. Be sure to catch our next installment answering anti-Islam, Sharia law, and world domination. There will also be a minisode or minisode following this called Deflection in Discourse.